The April 28, 2026 Forest Grove School District Board of Directors work session is called to order at 5:30 p.m. Roll call of board members present. Alma Lozano. Here. Risa Franco is absent. Kate Grandusky. Here. Pete Truax.
Here.
Maya Andrade is absent and Christy Kotke is here. We're going to move right into our work session topics tonight. And the very first one is an introduction of Dr. Doyle Holzman, who will be our new principal at Quality Plains. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. West.
Great, thank you.
Should use this. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Doyle Holzman as our new principal for Tuolumne Plains High School. Doyle will be taking over on July 1st officially when the new year turns over for Tim Graham, the retiring principal. We are really excited about Dr. Holzman and his experiences that he's bringing to us here in Forest Grove School District. Dr. Holzman has experience in alternative schools, so he brings a really important lens for our students and is also multilingual, and Spanish is one of the languages that Dr. Holzman speaks, which will be really important for our students in Tuolumne Plains. Up on the slide there, you can see some information about our new colleague, but I want to offer, Doyle, is there anything that you'd like to say to the school board or to those watching at this time?
Yeah, just that I'm thrilled to be here.
Great. Well, again, we are super excited. Dr. Holzman has already spent some time visiting with the staff and the students, and we look forward to all of the great things that he's going to bring to the high school next year. So welcome to Forest Grove School District. We're excited.
Thank you so much. And next we're going to hear about our ramp achievement from a counseling team. I'm going to also turn that over to Dr. West.
Thank you. I'm going to provide a very brief introduction, and then I'm actually going to turn it over to Cassie Kenny. So I want to take a moment to recognize the work happening across our district and specifically related to school counseling. In 2026, there were only 4 schools in the state of Oregon that achieved RAMP status, and Forest Grove School District is proud to be the home of 3 of those 4. So that's pretty remarkable. 3 out of 4 of the schools in the state, not just our community in the state, are here in Forest Grove. So congratulations to the teams at Forest Grove High School, Neil Armstrong Middle School, and Joseph Gale Elementary for earning this distinction. Also want to recognize Tom McCall Upper Elementary, which achieved RAMP status in 2025. An incredible accomplishment that continues to reflect the strength of our counseling programs. I think one of the best aspects of this is not only the great services that we're able to provide to our students for achieving RAMP status. There's a pretty cool plaque to go along with it. Right there. Thank you for the show and tell. This recognition speaks to the dedication, the collaboration, and the student-centered work happening in our schools every day. So at this time, I'd like to invite our counselors, Tommy Cox, Kelsey Call, Gwen Torson, and Eric Seavey, as well as Cassie Kenny, to come up to the mic here and share some comments about the RAMP program.
Wonderful. Thank you. Does it work for us to just all kind of stand around here? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for allowing us. Oh, I think we're good. Sure. Yeah. Thank you for allowing us to come and talk a little bit about the great achievement that our school counseling programs in our district have had over the past several years. We are going to do some quick introductions, and then we're going to keep it short, although we could talk about comprehensive school counseling for hours. And we just have a few slides to talk about RAMP.
So I'm Kelsey Call, school counselor at Neil Armstrong Middle School.
I'm Gwen Torson, school counselor with the cold at Tom McCall Upper Elementary.
I'm Tommy Cox, counselor at Forest Grove High School.
Eric Seavey at Joseph Gale.
And Cassie Kenny, district coordinator for behavioral health and wellness. And
so this first slide is a quick summary about RAMP.
I might, Kelsey, just for people that might be listening, or just.
There's a mic right there.
Okay, thanks.
That's what those are called. Check.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So RAMP is an acronym and it stands for Recognized ASCA Model Program. ASCA, also an acronym, which stands for American School Counselor Association. So it's a very fun acronym inside of an acronym, so you know it's special. But it's a designation that is awarded by the American School Counseling Association to schools that provide high quality, data-driven, comprehensive school counseling programs. And the application process is very rigorous. There's a lot of data collection, a lot of evidence that you have to show about how you're balancing your direct and indirect services, that you're planning your program with fidelity. And it's a pretty intensive data analysis that you do for one particular year, and then you apply based on that data. And the rubric for achieving the passing score is quite high and rigid. But it really helps to shift from a reactive model of school counseling to a proactive one that uses data-driven student outcomes.
Next slide.
Yeah, next, thank you.
And yes, so there are 11 ramp schools in Oregon and, oh, that was fast. And we are 4 of them. So Forest Grove High School, Neil Armstrong, Tom McCall, and Joseph Gale.
Okay, so what does the research say about RAMP? RAMP has been around for about 20 years or so roughly in school counseling, but it's increased job satisfaction and reduced role ambiguity directly correlates with higher ASCA implementation scores. ASCA assessments allow counselors to basically look through data. ASCA also, it helps basically close the achievement gaps. So basically what it does to summarize kind of all this academic language is that RAMP targets interventions for students that are behind with the achievement gap or underrepresented students. It basically has a focus and a purpose and a scope and sequence for your whole school building in your community. It improves students' attendance, behavior, academic areas, and improves your school climate. So it basically gives you a focus as a school that really affects the students that need even extra support. So that's what RAMP does. And so it's like a 2-year process, like we mentioned, a year of kind of reviewing how it works, and then another year of basically submitting it to RAMP, the association.
And so, I've got a very white throat, sorry. And so, we love to ask our colleagues, why RAMP? Why are we doing this? And so captured some thoughts from each of us and our teams. It's definitely not one person applying, it's a team. It includes an advisory council and administrative approval and feedback. So it's not a solo interaction to apply and receive RAMP, but a collective. So I'm going to pass the mic around, and each school counselor is going to talk about their why, and it represents the school, not just the one individual that's speaking.
All right, we'll kick off with Joseph Gale. So Joseph Gale, our students, like all students, deserve the best programs. And RAMP really ties that up for the best programs for our students. Using data, like I said previously, it lowers achievement gaps, it improves attendance, improves climate. And it basically looks at the areas in the schools that need that boosting so kids can get what they need to be successful. You know, have a choice of life.
Okay, and Tom McCall, when we put our heads together, we value the importance of the balance between what we would call old school counseling, which is really being in your office and being available for any intervention that might come this way, and what we know is best practice says we don't get the results with all children. So part of being a RAMP school and the RAMP process is letting us evaluate what we're doing and ensuring that we're using data to drive all of our decisions. Without data, and for example, the Panorama platform that lives on our screen, and we're looking at that social, emotional, and academic child. It's not just one glance, but a collection of data points. And from there, we provide the additional support or reinforcement for academics for that emotional piece of who we are, as well as with them and their friends socially.
over at Neil Armstrong, the thing that has stood out most to all of us, every time that we talk about it, and we talk about this pretty frequently, I would say, because we appreciate it so much, what the process has allowed for us to achieve. But we focus a lot on using our data more intentionally in order to identify the practices that are more effective and how we can become more efficient with our time. Because for a very long while, we were very reactive. And we are able to track better what's actually working for students, because we are all collaborating using the RAMP framework more thoroughly. And with that, we've been able to evolve our school counseling program in a sustainable, one step at a time for different areas. And that growth has maintained. It hasn't been back and forth whiplash. And so it's continuing to develop for us.
In high school, I would say same. We really use RAMP to help us assess like our current programs, and evaluate what we're doing and try to figure out how we can improve to best support our students. Another thing I would like to mention is our data using RAMP really helps us communicate with stakeholders inside and outside of our buildings about all the supports we do and provide as home counselors.
Great, thank you. So it's more than just a plaque, is what I'm hearing, which is good. That's good. What's next? Dilly Elementary is currently in their data collection year and they anticipate applying for RAMP in October 2026. So fingers crossed. Like you've heard, it's a very rigorous process. Cornelius Elementary and Echo Shaw Elementary are our next cohort of schools to go through their data collection year next year. They've been working on alignment this year, and next year they will be collecting all of their data and hoping to apply in October 2027. And we also just want to put a plug in here for anybody who is listening about how you can get involved in comprehensive school counseling in our RAMP programs and district, and that's through our school counseling advisory membership. I know we have a couple of school board members who currently sit or have sat on our school counseling advisories at our RAMP schools. They meet twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring. And the purpose is to look at the goals our school counselors are setting for the year, to advise on what are the community needs, how can we improve as a comprehensive school counseling program. And then in the spring, we look at data and we review, what did we do this year? How did it work? What worked, what didn't work, and how can we continue to improve?
I was just gonna say, it's built some really great sorry, Director Cassie. It's built some really great partnerships, that advisory committee, with people here in Forest Grove and other organizations that have really benefited our students throughout the whole school year. And so that's been the biggest part, is those partnerships, and now we have those relationships that have been year after year now. And so now it's just, over and over again, which is benefiting our kids and our families, so.
That's it. Okay. Anything else, guys? Any questions?
If I could add before the questions, this is unusual across the state. I've been in several districts, worked in several districts, and this commitment to the counseling program is unusual in the state of Oregon. Gwen, I've never been in a school where a counselor had a caseload of 700. But I have been in schools where a counselor had a caseload of 400, 500. That is not unheard of in other schools across the state. So this commitment is really unusual and important for our students. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Questions from the board? Comments?
May I just ask really quickly, what kind of partnerships are you referring to when you talk about partnerships?
For us at Joseph Gale, we've been really fortunate. We have some partnerships with the city of Forest Grove, Parks and Rec, also Pacific University. We have a really strong partnership with the athletic department there. And then also the Hillsborough Hops as well, and the Trailblazers. So there's been some really, if you like sports, so for our students, they like sports and getting opportunities to go to events for free and connecting and bringing that into the school. So we have some great partnerships there. And community members too, parents and stuff, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sure can.
We also have had Adelante be a part of our advisory, and we really work to get local community members on board, and we're very cognizant about who are the parents, who are the community members, board members, We get to cross-pollinate across schools. We attend each other's advisories. So we know that all of the children, for the most part, that go from Tom Hall are going to go up to Neil Armstrong. And so we're really looking for that consistency. So also just being able to partner with our colleagues as well as our parents. And a lot of our parents, and like 6 have wanted to move from our advisory at Tom Hall to ask, could they stay in the advisory at Neil Armstrong?
One other that's been really great, over at NAMS is the connection with Cornelius Public Library. I think actually one of our longest standing advisory committee members, is David Freeze over at the public library there. And over time, they've been adapting some of their homework support that we refer a lot of students to get tutoring, homework support, and try to get them plugged into the library as much as possible. And he's been great.
I think I'd like to add, I mean, I have been able to participate in the advisories, but once at the middle school, but then at the high school. And what I really, first of all, congratulations, because I think the work that it takes to qualify for this program, only a piece of that do you see really when you're in those advisory sessions and you see the detail that's presented and the work that goes into that alone. I think what it's really done for me is it's changed how I understand how counseling has changed since the days when I went to school. And one of the biggest takeaways I have from those meetings is how every minute of a counselor's day is detailed in where it lands in support of kids. And it really shows a complete picture of the work that counseling is doing. But the other thing, Gwen, that you talked about was collective action or the collaboration. You can feel that through the counseling department. I mean, that's a compliment to everybody in the departments that you all work together, and that thread when I'm in the middle school in that meeting and what's happening at the high school is evident. And so I think the team effort here is probably what has made this go above and beyond. I feel like the counseling department, you've gotten the ramp, but I feel like you go above and beyond that to dig into the data. I would like, in the future somehow to figure out how we can bring more of even an example of that meeting where we could even film a piece of it to show the community, like this is the type of thing that our counselors are doing. And this is the work that this is, just getting the story out there. So that's now helpful to me. I get asked all the time if counseling comes up, what are the counselors doing? And I can speak to that more specifically now because of that inclusion there. But just a compliments to your team on that work and for all that you do on so many layers for kids and for the time tonight to then come to the work session after a day and share with the board. But I think it's really important to get the word out. Yeah.
And so it's with huge appreciation because without the board's support and getting that class size down or caseload size down, it's impossible to do best practice. And so I also want to recognize our board members that have made it a priority, our superintendent that says mental health is really important. Kids can't learn if the frontal lobe is shut down. So thank you for that because it allows us to do best practice. And then as much as she doesn't like it, I really want to pay tribute to Cassie because without, I know, sorry, Cassie, she literally has allowed us the space and the time and carved it out and advocated at the building level with our administrators, as well as pulling us together down to doing the templates for us ahead of time so we plug in data. So really without her support, and I've told her many times, so she knows this, but without that, it would have also been a much heavier lift than it already was. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the time again tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'm gonna talk just briefly too about some classroom visits that happened this week. We were able to, well, multiple things happened. Today, thank you to Kate and Andrea Loeffler at the high school for the pasta pilot, which is continuing. We were able to deliver the kids made pasta in Culinary Arts 4. I don't have a picture of it yet, but we will preview the pasta slideshow. We were able to go to Rotary and show a slideshow of the kids in the classroom working. And then people at Rotary were able to order pasta, tried out this new form. And then Kate and I today and Henry zipped around town. Well, we didn't zip, we drove carefully around town. And we're able to deliver pasta to different members of the community. And I was just telling Dr. West, the value in being at the doorway with pasta, then enabled some conversations to happen about the school district. And I think it's just these connections with people who maybe don't have kids in the district, but wanted to know more about schools. But thank you to Andrea. She has been text messaging, adjusting forms, making, getting supplies. I know they were at Dia de los Niños as well. I think Arturo mentioned that he brought some pasta home, and hoping to expand a link for the community so they can take advantage of that program. So thank you for that. The next slide there is we were able to get into Neil Armstrong, and Dr. Lumley and I were able to walk around and see the new science curriculum in action. And if we click to the next slide, Mr. Taplin, Mr. Everett, and Mr. Marshall, 3 science teachers that were put together a lab for us to see on this Wednesday. And the setup for this lab was really kind of mind-blowing to watch them setting up in real time for 30, 60 kids, and then another 30 in the next room, all getting instructions and then being set loose in these labs to work with these chemicals. And what they were doing is they're creating ultimately an incubator to keep a certain turtle, certain tortoise that's endangered at a certain temperature. And so they're trying to look at different combinations of chemicals and take measurements on a time scale, record those, and be able to use that information to then build eventually the incubator they think would work the best. But if we go to the next slide there, it's just a couple examples of every single student engaged. And it wasn't just because there was a school board member in there, it was because these teachers had all these kids prepped with their roles, all the materials you see laid out on every single table. We have instructional assistants helping individual students. We had kids working together in teams. And it was just really impressive. When we talked to a couple of different kids about what it was about this curriculum that they liked better, and every single group said, because we get to get out of the classroom, is what they said, and we get to do hands-on learning. And they were very engaged. It was high level. That was the other thing that was brought up, is these labs. I think it was Mr. Marshall talking to me about how these labs weren't really designed for middle school. Essentially, they were making adjustments to make it work for the middle school curriculum in real time, which teachers are able to do. But just the kids are all going back to get ready for the next class. The teachers then immediately resetting up the lab for the next class, and everything was just working like clockwork. And the boxes of materials that they're kind of trying to figure out how to arrange, it was just really amazing to see it all working, to see the kids connecting. So that was a really great experience. And just being in NAMS in general, learning happening every classroom. We walked through and saw lots of different types of classrooms and different kids engaged in different learning experiences. And it was just a really good vibe. I'm a middle school person myself, so I was right back at home. But nice to see the engagement, and really appreciative of the teachers who took the time to make some adjustments so we could see the work on that particular day. And we'll go to the next slide. And then we popped over to the high school, or I popped over to, I was in the hallway, and it was passing time. So I was trying to find Gwen Hollinger's room, actually, to look for her. And Andrew, and he's the one with the thumbs up in the picture, just a student seeing this lost middle-aged lady looking around. And I stopped him to say, can you point me towards art? And he said, oh, you know what? Yeah, and I'm happy to take you. And he walked with me all the way down to Gwen's room. And during this walk, he chatted with me about his goals. I asked him what he was hoping to study. And I said to him, you have an excellent customer service. You're just picking up this person in the hall and walking me down to class and talking to me about the environment. And he said, well, I've been told that before. And I said, well, am I going to keep you from class? He said, oh, I'm just going up to mechatronics. And I said, oh, I'm coming up to mechatronics. So we stopped but we went up to mechatronics, and they are inventing, designing, building, troubleshooting, auto-loading, pneumatically adjustable flywheel robots. Now, that's not something I remember again from my science days, but again, engaged in this group work, They were in this phase of experimenting, and it's equipment that was granted through a partnership with the city of Hillsborough to enhance high-tech manufacturing career pathway expansion. They were, yeah, so we had a good conversation there about the work they're doing, and then John Worth sent over a video, which is the next slide, just really quickly. This is just a real quick video of the contraption actually working. They're building this contraption that will fling a slingshot a ping pong ball. Things that entails. Thank you. So next slide. And then we stop by art, and for anyone in this entire community that wants to see miracles happening every day, it is in Miss Hollinger's class. These students were, you can see the picture there. They had chosen a picture, and then on their phones, they had a program where it breaks it down box by box, and she has them begin to shade in these portraits, and it blows my mind. I've been in there several times, and I used to teach with Gwen, but we again have an art teacher in this district that is teaching these kids just above and beyond. And again, 100% engagement, amazing, just amazing outputs here. We talked about, she was hoping to find an avenue, and maybe it's Valley Art, that would eventually host an art show in town. So these kids could put their artwork up in a public space where, and again, speaks to some possibilities of partnerships, but so that was great to see. And I think, let's see, yeah, those were just some classroom visits. I think we've heard some really good feedback from the meetings where we are showing either videos of what's happening in classroom with instruction, or just videos of kids at work in classroom and highlighting the work that's been done in these classrooms every day, and very powerful. So that's that. We are going to move on to board reflection and discussion. Pete.
Before we move on, I had the pleasure of attending a bake-off
Oh, that's great.
for the culinary arts. Made an idiot out of myself because I was eating way too much of all of the delightful food that they threw in front of me. They didn't throw it. I apologize for that. But again, the participation there was remarkable. Students were interested in, first of all, how well they did, and how well their creations were accepted by the judges that were there. The other thing, you made a comment about the art program, about Ms. Hollinger, and mentioned Valley Art. I am old enough that I can remember Phil Tice at the high school doing the same thing, not only being an art teacher, but also on the board at Valley Art and coordinating the student art show that was there. And we do need to bring that back. And I'll have a conversation with Linda Allen, the executive director of Valley Art, to see if we can reestablish that particular bridge. But again, that gives a student a real world appreciation of what they do at the high school and how it bleeds into the community. So I'll work on that.
Thank you.
And I think the library, they have the new teen center. That'd be a perfect place to highlight the art. That would be really good.
And we need to thank Mayor Wenzel for creating that area and for her charging on the Youth Advisory Committee for the mayor for the city of Forest Grove.
And it's really, I was there today, and they're really using that space. It's really exciting to see the kids do that.
All right. Okay, we're going to move into board reflection and discussion. I want to take a minute. I think we all have had, this is a really intense time for our district and our community. And we've been really working to make sure we're listening and available, but also sharing information that needs to be shared. I think the board meeting tonight is a chance for us to take a little bit of time to just reflect on what we have heard, some changes we've made, and then where we're headed, what's next as far as our roles. So one of the things there's a whole bunch that's happened in the past week, and all of us I know have been hearing from different people and experienced different, we've come to the Tuesday meeting, we've had emails and phone calls and conversations with people in the community. I just was meeting with someone in the community before this meeting, and he did not realize, I said, you know, this board meeting tonight is really the only time twice a month that this board gets to sit and have a discussion. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, we aren't able to have a discussion outside of this boardroom together. So I think that there's some of what I've heard from people is not really learning about what this meeting is and why some of what they see is happening and who's playing what role. But I think for tonight, this meeting is designed a little bit differently so that we can have a little bit more of discussion together, and get aligned on where we're going and also share information with the community. One of the things that came up, I've asked Dr. West to speak a little bit about trying to break down what board governance work is. A lot of questions from different people. I know Alma, you've mentioned it multiple times in meetings, like people saying, I don't understand what the school board does. I don't understand who tells who what to do, who's making the decisions, how this all works, how does the community interface, and how should we interface. So the first few slides here, I'm going to ask if Dr. West might talk us through a little bit, just a little summary of what that looks like.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. If we advance the slides, please. I'm gonna go through these just briefly and ask the board to pause if you have questions. Essentially, if you think about the ecosystem of education, it's helpful to think of them as three different categories. If you start with the roots, we have the community. It's our community that provides anchors in values and student needs. And it's really important that we listen to our community, interact with them, hear their perspective and input. You think in terms of a tree, the trunk then is the school board, and the school board is responsible for governance and structural policies that help the school district run and operate. It's a governing body, it sets policy. It does not direct daily operations. And then you have the branches and the leaves, which includes the superintendent and the staff of the school district, responsible for daily operations, fiscal management, improvement efforts, responding to emergent needs. You could compare a school superintendent to a CEO, and the CEO is responsible for the operational instructional arms of the district. And importantly, translating board policies, so policies that the board determine, into strategy and action. Next slide, please. In terms of the board itself, the board has a few really important functions. One is policy authority, which we've already touched on. So the board establishes policy to govern the district and the schools. And the conversations take place in public meetings, just like you just referenced, and those meetings are recorded. Votes are recorded in the public. And then the board provides a direct method for the school community to share values and needs that inform policy. The board has executive oversight, so the board appoints the superintendent, evaluates the superintendent, authorizes the budget, provides financial oversight, and approves contracts. The board also has appellate authority, and the appellate authority is not often activated, but it's an important function for the school board, in that when there is a staff member, a family member who feels as though the district in some form or an individual within the district has violated our policies, they have the option to work through an appeal process all the way up to the school board. And then the school board acts as a fact-finding body, an appellate body, to determine were policies followed or not.
And then the school board either upholds the decisions made by the district and the district personnel or can overturn those decisions. Next slide, please. There's a lot of overlap between the school district, the superintendent, and the school board. And what this table is trying to show is that there's areas where overlap makes a lot of sense in terms of decision-making authority and communication channels. The colors are a little wonky there, so I apologize for that in this version, but I'll try to orient us to it. So the school board defines policy, the superintendent implements policy and oversees district operations. That's something that is distinct. It is the primary focus of both the superintendent and the school board. In terms of decision-making, the school board acts collectively and authority exists through recorded vote in public meetings. The superintendent acts as an individual executive, the authority to delegate, manage, direct staff. In terms of staffing and personnel, the school board employs and evaluates only one person, that's the superintendent. The superintendent implements personnel policies, evaluates and manages all of their staff in the school district. And then in terms of communication, the school board advises the superintendent on matters related to policy, and directives and policies are communicated to staff through the superintendent. The superintendent then provides that conduit between ongoing communication among community staff and the board. And I want to emphasize there that that does not preclude anyone in the community from addressing a school board member directly, and they should, just as it doesn't preclude school board members from visiting school events and interacting with students and others. But the reason for these distinctions is so that the work can proceed in an organized fashion and it doesn't get messy. You need to have defined roles to ensure that the work of educating kids proceeds smoothly. And there are areas where collaboration is super important. Next slide, please. So while there are distinctions, without that collaboration, the school district doesn't operate very well. So it's important that we keep those channels of communication open, that we have common goals, that we are working on a strategic plan, that policies and the decisions center student needs. That's how the school board and the superintendent work most effectively, when we share those values and those goals. This is a super high level overview. There's hundreds of details underneath that, but that's the gist of the distinction between the school board as a governing body and a policy governance structure versus the daily operations of the school district. What questions may I answer?
Could we go back to the previous slide, just one back? Thank you. And thank you for putting that together and that explanation. I think when I reflect on really how we just went through this most recent decision, and like you said, there's hundreds of things underneath what you just said that we need to tease out. But I think this gives the board a starting point. This isn't a deep discussion we'll go into tonight, but I think it is a discussion we can come back to. I know as a board member, and this was true as a city councilor, I seem to lots of comments to me in that role requesting me to do things that were the superintendent or the city manager's position. And so really, I think what our board has been trying to do this year is resetting, first of all, people having those discussions at the levels where they are, where it's, if there's an issue that they have with the school or a question, first bringing it to their principal or their local leadership. And that's, you know, redirecting people to where those questions and decisions need to lay. And I think sometimes there's still an education piece, and I wanted to sort of start here with a refresh and also for the community, so we can kind of work together to figure out what that looks like. And when people say, well, can't you just make this happen? And then I can say, well, actually, no, I don't make that part happen, but here's my role. So I'm going to pause there. I think this gives us a starting place to be able to have a conversation with the community when they when they want to give input, and my conversation is, well, it might be input about a value or a goal, but input about a decision that the superintendent's making is different. And I think we're getting a little bit, we need to get some clarity around what that looks like, and that comes from just continuing to ask the questions and having these conversations around, referring to a model like this. And I'll let other board members jump in there, but
I do like this. I think it is, as a parent before being, in the school board and being more involved. Some of these were questions of mine, so just having a clear understanding of where to go and who to talk to makes me as a parent feel perhaps less frustrated. Not going to someone that I think is gonna get it done, but isn't really the person I need to connect with. So having this understanding gives kind of a clear picture of where everyone and, lands. So I do appreciate that as a parent and community member.
I think it's pretty common that, the community misunderstands the role of a board member. They think that we have more authority, more power than we actually do. And a part of that is because, they have busy lives, but they think that because we were elected, we can do something, but it's no different than city council, the Senate, Congress, there's some things you can do and some things you can't do. And I think the thing that happened recently, is that, people, I felt, that, the staff felt like that we weren't really strongly advocating for them. And, we do have to approve the budget, but we don't make the budget, we question, we ask, and we get clarifying, answers, but we do not do any of the everyday things that happen in the workings of the organization. And I think, the question I always have, and since I've been on the board, is how can we help the community and also our staff understand our role, what we can and what we cannot do, because what recently happened, that we had to take these decisions about our budget, that we're in a deficit spending. The community was saying, well, couldn't you do more? Why didn't you ask more questions? And that's a whole nother example of how we can try to communicate better. Because if anybody had been watching the budget meetings from a year ago or listening in on a monthly basis, reading the superintendent's weekly report, it would not have been a surprise. But being a teacher myself, I recognize that, I have my nose in the classroom and I'm focused very much there and I'm not thinking about anything else. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, this isn't okay, or, why can't the board member do more? How did this happen? So in both instances, how do we communicate our role and how do we, I don't know what else we can do, with communicating about, since COVID, we do have, Zoom and YouTube where you can watch the board meetings, which I think is a real gift because, after dinner or Saturday or Sunday, when you have some time, you can watch those or listen to, they can be very boring, but, I don't know. I was talking to Christy about this, maybe once a month, the monthly teacher meeting in each building with the principal, they remind the staff, tune into the superintendent's report, the budget meeting and, the board meeting. And I know that our business manager puts out monthly a statement of where we're at, but we're all in this together. It's not just the board, it's not just the superintendent. It's all of us, the teachers and staff, and how can we creatively work together and then also find partnerships and solutions, so that our kids do well.
I appreciate that. If I may go back to something you said about where the board has authority, policy governance is a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power within policy, and I think that is sometimes challenging for people who are not in a public role or immersed in the type of work that we do to understand the difference between policy governance and oversight, which is what the board does, and then the day-to-day operations. But the board within the realm of policy sets the direction for the school district and creates bumpers for the school district in terms of what we can do and what we can't do. Some of those policies are determined for us by law, federal or state laws. But we have many policies within the district that we have purview over, and that is where the school board has quite a bit of authority. A good example of that is the recent discussion around the ending fund balance. I don't know when 8% was set as threshold. Somebody had the foresight to realize that we need savings to carry us at least through a month. But that is an area where as a school board, we could say 8% isn't the right number, it's 11%, or it's 15%. Or do we need a contingency fund as well as an ending fund balance? So that is where the school board has quite a bit of authority and power within a school district and can really set the direction for a leadership team.
Other comments? Okay, I think this is a starting conversation around these rules that we can come back to, especially when things come up and we can refer back to this as where we're anchoring and who's doing what. And this is helpful too, I think, for the board to be able to be clear in our communication when we're talking to people in the community. To your point, Kate, and we'll go to the next slide if we can, around communication, one more maybe. Yeah, we have been able to make some adjustments, I think, that will improve the communication. When we look back at the process that we've used to get here, we do feel pretty confident that that process of every school building having a meeting with their staff and principal around the budget, opportunities after that at each school for the community to join, community opportunities to join, the budget meetings, those parts of the process were needed. And I think what we're hoping to figure out is how do we encourage more people in the community and those school communities to come to those meetings and give that feedback. I know when staff had those meetings in their buildings, I believe it maybe during in-service time on Wednesdays or
Times differ.
Times differ, but opportunities there and making sure that when, you know, that we can build on those existing processes that are there. I do think there's a couple, based on conversations we've had with different people, some teachers about the process and parents about the process. Bethany, if we move to the next slide, we were able to add a couple different things to the website. The first thing we added was a running frequently asked questions, and those questions changed daily. And thank you to Dr. West for being very responsive in adding as they came in. And I want the community, if you're watching, to be able to reference those frequently asked questions. And those are also, that's feedback you could give to the board, like this is another question we're wondering, right? Or if you're a teacher asking your principal, I don't see this on the frequently asked questions, how can we get an answer to this? But that's a pretty extensive list right now of questions I've just looked through recently. And that strategy of, especially when we know there are going to be questions, being able to respond in real time. I think we did something similar at the city around homelessness, and people appreciated having it somewhere to anchor to. The second slide there after this, the next one, Enrique. We have a board legislative advocacy page as well. And so one of the things I was able to do is I asked permission from our speakers, the teachers who came that evening, and our actually a rep who gave testimony, if they would be willing to share that written testimony with me so that I could attach it, which we were able to do, and send to Representative McLean and Senator Solman with a summary of the cuts that we are making and the impact it's having, and attaching those letters to that. And now we have a place where we will be able to attach letters and advocacy work that we do. There's also a place that gives information about public testimony and public testimony that's submitted through the website that will be posted in the packet. And then we've also added the link to the legislative candidate questionnaires. We've had 2 submitted so far, Senator Solomon and I believe Harold Hutchinson responded to the questions that this board put out. And those are uploaded for the community to be able to take a look at those answers. So a change made there to have that more accessible. And then next slide. And then again, just orienting people to where you can see where the board packet is posted. And board packet is posted before the meeting, usually on Friday, by Friday. And that is a time where we hope people will access that board packet, read through the materials, read through the agenda. That is a great time when you see that there to reach out if there are questions. Again, it might be if you're staff to your principal, might be if your community directly to us with questions, but time before the board meeting to be able to ask questions that we can answer, have a conversation. Because I think I've talked about this at these meetings, board meetings, and this is not a conversation we'll have tonight about public comment and how these meetings run, but as you can see here tonight, we have a couple people here. And I'm not sure how many people will be able to see the conversation, but Kate's point of, how can we do more to share what we're doing? And make sure we're sharing maybe some highlights that people need to see, but we're happy to continue to get feedback and answer questions and have people come to this page and look at what's there and read the materials, the same materials that we all get on the same day. So the materials that the community sees is what the board sees on that day. And then we take from Friday to Tuesday to read through it, to do our due diligence, to call and ask questions if we have them. So I just heard again from a person before this meeting, it seems like the board just comes to these meetings, rubber stamps the contracts, for instance, and I explained, well, that we post that for the community 5 days before, and that's a chance for this board to ask questions and do that work. And when you're seeing us at this final meeting, that is the meeting where we're taking the action. So trying to get people to participate a little bit more when they can, when those packets are posted. Anything to add to that? Yes, Director Trax.
And my concern is that, or my observation is that when everything is going smoothly, when budgets are balanced, when things are moving placidly through the school system, when students are learning and nobody's getting expelled and there are no fights and so on and so forth, we do a terrible job of saying, look at the great job we're doing. It's almost like the kid who was growing up and never said anything, stone cold silent. And then one night when he was 14 years old at the dinner table, he said, pass the peas, please. And mom just went nuts. She said, you have never talked in your life. This is the first time that you've ever mentioned. Yeah, everything was okay up till now. Bad joke, I get it, but the idea of us, we have to put up sometimes with people saying, yeah, everything's fine. Why do I need to rock the boat? Why do I need to look over people's shoulders? Well, they do. Because that's when you can find out what you're doing that's right. You can get reinforcement for that, not only as a superintendent, not only as a teacher, not only as a school board member, but as a community. And when things do get rough, everybody remembers, yeah, we are all in this together. It's not so-and-so's fault. It's not, we can find a number of people to blame for the situation we're in. But maybe the seeds were planted 10, 15, 20 years ago, and we're now just bearing the bitter fruit that particular crop. And I realize that I mixed up my metaphors there, and I apologize, but if we are going to pay attention, if school board members are going to pay attention, if teachers are going to pay attention, if public is going to pay attention, we need to examine those things that we do in light of what's it gonna mean 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Because we all know Measure 5 was passed in 1990, and we are really beginning to see what damage that has done to education in the state of Oregon. And nobody predicted that it would have that kind of effect. But it does, it did, and it does, so. And I realize that I have talked way too long and apologize, and I don't know if I said anything worth listening to. Got it off my chest.
I think, your point of, when everything's going well, it's a time also for the board to continue to interact in schools, whether sports, your kids playing sports in it, or plays, or, be a listening ear, and also a communicator, and also celebrator of the accomplishments that the students have made, and also the teachers, and being seen. I think it's really important to be seen, and and each one of us comes to the board and has different passions. Your children are in sports, Pete, everybody. They do. But we all have something that we're really interested in, and and since I've been on the board and since I've been retired, I go one day a week. And I've been in all the schools from the year I go and read, and you can walk into a building and really feel the ambience of the building. And I have seen since 2011, so many good things happening in all of our buildings. Do I want more? Oh, yes, I want 1,000 times more for the kids, and have all kinds of dreams and visions. But what I do see is that consistency by being in the building. I see the hard work of the staff, and I see the joy of the children. And I also see and felt how appreciative staff have been to see board members, and we have been elected by the community, and we have different ways that we can serve them with our unique interests. And I think that's an important piece, that when things are going well, you still need to stay engaged, and I have seen that since I've been on, especially this board and the previous boards. People have been engaged by their interests and their passions. So, and also as the community, what they see us, I don't know, that's sort of what they like to see us do, but being out in the community. But some of us work, some of us are retired, so you have to be flexible. I think it's important. I also think that school districts are not good at advertising themselves. I don't know if I'm putting this right, but there's a tremendous amount of good, I would say, just tremendous amount of good happening. And we don't seem to know how to advertise all the great stuff that the kids are doing. I mean, I should have filmed today when I went to the high school, and 6 kids came out, everything was labeled, everything. And then one girl ran out, she goes, "Oh, I forgot to put the thank you on one of the boxes," and I mean, it was just really, really sweet. And they were so excited, and I mean, you see preschoolers really excited, but here are these high school kids, and they did a beautiful job. And I've seen that since I've been on the board. We just don't seem to advertise all the wonderful good stuff that's happening pre-kinder all the way through, transition. And I think, I often think we need a professional PR person to help us do that, because we are doing really, really good things in every single building. Even here at the district office, is out the kids here, so. That's my 2 cents.
I, just to, go on that. Not too close, that's also good. I think that's not just the school district. I think that includes our parents and our community members too, sharing the good stuff. I think often is you hear the bad stuff versus hearing the good stuff. And that's very common in our community. So it would be nice to share the positive things that honestly, all of this, I think, in my opinion, it's accountability, but accountability from the root, the trunk and up, right? It's just all of us really engaging and having that accountability of, hey, what role do I play? It's not just the school system. It's, from the roots and up. In advocacy, if something isn't going well, if something's not doing well, like really advocating for, for our students or our teachers or, whoever it is that needs that accountability, that advocacy. And then at the end of all that, when it does get rough, the best thing to do is to unite and find a solution versus come against each other. I think that just divides us and it doesn't really give us like a good, it's just not a good feeling overall. And it feels like it's them against us or, and it shouldn't be like that. It really shouldn't be like that. Even in my household, we have different opinions, but we don't just go ahead and say, well, bye, we go ahead and just work it, we unite and we work it through. And I mean, it should be the same thing in our system here. So accountability, advocacy, and of course, when things get rough, we unite to get through it.
I think that's a nice segue, Alma, to the next piece here, but I think that is what came up from this, from what I've heard from lots of different people, is all kinds of things historically. People from mentioning things in this district from 20 years ago that, things that have just bubbled up, not just about this incredibly stressful situation, but it brought up all of the things we hear that people want for all of our school systems in the state. Actually, this is a perfect segue because what we did see, and I do want to compliment everybody, and a gentleman said this to me about the meeting on Tuesday. He was surprised and relieved at how respectful people were in the comments. I heard that about the board meeting. It was amazing that the audience just was able to listen and then come with comments that were critical. And I think those are all the conversations we've been in. I don't think I've had one where I felt like it was combative. I felt like parents were bringing concerns and listening and partnering. I felt like teachers were doing the same, understanding information, asking good questions. And I agree with you, I think this is an incredibly stressful situation. We recognize that. We've made some changes we think can help. I think we've all learned from these last few weeks of moving through this and even moving forward from tonight forward. I think it already feels like we're setting a new foundation for how we do the work together. But that being said, this last part of the meeting is something I did want to bring publicly, and I'll have Enrique go to this next section. When you mention advocacy, I'm not sure any of the advocacy any of these boards have been doing in this state. In fact, I know it has not been effective. We've just talked about this time and time again with OSBA and board members saying, we've done everything we could do. We've written the letters. We've gone to the legislative days. We've invited our reps for meetings and coffees. We've shown the budgets in January. We have done everything, and not just this board. It is not working. Today, what we're gonna see here is a heartbreaking and soul-crushing example of what is happening at the state level of Superintendent Mendoza and Becky Timchuk advocating and saying all the things that we have been saying as boards and as superintendents to the Board of Ed, to the people who supposedly are setting some rules, and a complete breakdown and I've said it a million times, a disconnect. So I don't know, I don't have an answer today, and we're not gonna have this discussion today, but what we are doing is not working because our legislators are continuing to pass things that aren't the things we need. And today was another example this morning in the Board of Ed meeting. And again, Kate, to your point, when I was a teacher, I did not even know there was a Board of Ed I did not even know there was a union. I mean, I knew I was in the union. I didn't know I was like teaching with my little teaching team, and that was what I was doing. But there is a layer here that I would like the community to have access to, including this board. And again, this makes it a longer meeting, but this is the only time this board gets to watch something together and discuss it together. And this, I think, is gonna be a really key thing to watch. So the first, and before we go to that, yes, the ask from the community is this budget meeting on May 14, 6:30. We would really encourage you to make time in your schedule or eventually stream or get word out to all your parents and community that this is a foundational piece that we need the community to understand how the budget works and what the budget is going to be proposed and why, so that we can build together, kind of build a common understanding. So next slide, Enrique. Again, upcoming meetings, and maybe we will start to do this if this works in these meetings to let the community know. The next actual business meeting we have will be on the 12th. That will be where this board brings the superintendent evaluation to the public meeting for approval. Prior to that, we usually show a timeline. That is something we do in executive session because it's a personnel issue and that's what the law requires. But we are gonna add a section to that meeting where we do a big review of what it is that the board looks at when we look at superintendent evaluation, what our superintendent shows us. We aren't allowed to specifically go into the evaluation of Dr. West, but I think for the community to wonder, well, how is this board evaluating the superintendent? Great question. Great question. So we're gonna try to show more than we did last year about how we do that for people. That again will be posted in the packet the week before. So if you read that packet, that would be a great time to reach out for questions. And we're just trying to make a few improvements here to communication. And then the budget meeting, May 14th. The next slide is the Board of Ed. A couple of weeks ago, the Board of Ed met and the governor's office a week before the Board of Ed meeting called every member of the Board of Ed into the governor's office individually for a conversation. The conversation was not something that was public. And then, I don't know, rumors got out that the governor was planning to show up at the Board of Ed. It wasn't on the agenda to announce an executive order. At the beginning of the Board of Ed meeting, they changed the agenda in real time and said the governor will be here we're adding an executive order to the agenda on that day. And then the governor showed up at the meeting at the table and dropped an executive order that you've all seen in the news, which is about no longer being able to use furlough days. Now, there were multiple variations of what the executive order could have been. There's some behind the scenes finagling of maybe it's this, checking with people, should it be this? But none of that process was transparent. And that is not the way the state can be doing education policy, which you'll see in a minute. So the comments that we're gonna watch here are the comments immediately after this executive order dropped. The original order would have required school districts to essentially add more days to their calendar. So this happened in real time. People in the Board of Ed did not even have a copy of the executive order. And so this is a response. We'll start with Superintendent Advisor Becky Timchuk, who represents school boards. And then we're gonna watch George Mendoza's response, because he's the Superintendent Advisor. This is their direct response after this executive order dropped. So Enrique, could you play the?
Now we will go to our school board advisor, Becky Timchuk. Thank you, Chair Skurlock. Board of Education. There's an old saying that education is not the filling of a bucket, rather it's the lighting of a fire. And I have kept that saying in mind during my career as a leader in an education nonprofit that worked with our state schools, as a parent, as a classroom volunteer, and as a member and a chairman of the Beaverton School Board, as well as a member and current chairman of the Northwest Regional ESD. And all of those roles, I have worked to make it easier for our schools and our teachers to light fires in the hearts and the minds of our students. That work has never been more important than it is now. And it's no secret because the press reminds us almost daily that Oregon ranks near the bottom based on just tests, but we know our students are more than just tests. We know that our schools are made up more than just what the press sees. We know the hearts and the minds, but that is what our public sees. And the questions I've been asking myself, and I thought about during this week of getting ready for this meeting, because I've heard from many, many school board members, is what are we doing? Everything we can do to empower our schools and teachers to light those fires. Or we perhaps just a state with just good intentions, adopting policies that snuff out those fires. So we need to be honest. Is the state board that sits here in Salem and doesn't have the responsibility of balancing a budget like all of our 197 school districts do? Are they making decisions that will reduce the levers available to local schools to balance theirs? And the state board will get to take credit for protecting instructional time, and local leaders will be the ones to take the heat when there are layoffs and impact class size when bargaining over schedules has to be the consequence. If you don't think these decisions are difficult or that districts just haven't been managing their money well enough, I would challenge any legislator, any business leader, anyone to come and spend an hour or two at our school districts and see how hard our business managers, our superintendents, our central office, our teachers, our bargaining units, our students are dedicated to trying to do what is right in our classrooms. So let's don't just be in a bubble here of thinking that the decisions that this board, the rules this board is going to make, do not have absolute, perhaps horrific consequences out in our school districts.
And then
Thank you so much, School Board Advisor Becky Tipchak. Thank you.
we're gonna go to.
And now,
Next one is Superintendent Advisor George Mendoza responding to the impact that this executive order potentially could have on school districts.
thank you. And we'll go to some other questions. So we have Superintendent Advisor George Mendoza, and then we will go to Vice Chair Shanika Montgomery.
Thank you, Chair Skurlock. I've been able to ask a few questions here and there to Dr. Williams, so I'm not necessarily going to ask a lot of superintendent questions. I can elaborate with other superintendents at some point, but I'm going to make some comments of just the implementation of this and the impact. I do support maintaining as well as increasing instructional time. So I want that to be clear, but I think just adding time for the sake of adding time is not going to do a lot. We need quality instruction. We need adequate staffing. We need student safety and conducive learning environments to ensure that learners thrive. So you need that first before just adding time. We need sustainable funding. And if we're going to have that, then we can add more days back. So I'm specifically focused more on the executive order around Section 4, Part D, the revision of hours of instructional time definitions, specifically for taking away 30 hours of staff professional development and 30 hours of parent-teacher conferences. I'm just going to say most districts use those 60 hours and count those 60 hours. So to add back 7 or 8 days is a lot for school districts. So even the new rule that's being proposed, that Section 6, Parts D and E for the 30-hour provisions, we need significant funding to support the implementation or changes around that. So I'm going to say these things because I was typing them down while it was being presented. Most districts with declining enrollment are currently reducing 10 to 15% of their budgets right now. If we add back another 60 hours as written in those sections, that'll basically add us another 6 to 7% of costs. To add 6, I'll just say 7 to 8 more days, 6 to 7% of additional costs. And that's associated payroll, that's PERS rate growth increases, that's other state and federal taxes, FICA and Social Security that we have to pay for. That, to me, in my quick calculations, 60 hours is about $700 million that the state would have to pay so that we could add back 60 hours of additional work time. Okay, and so when we don't count professional development and parent-teacher conferences anymore, that is a significant issue for schools. Schools have been historically, before my time as a superintendent, been able to count those 60 hours. So guess what? They do. And when they do, to unravel this thing, to claw back this thing will be a lot, not a little, a lot for school districts. Okay, so changing this requirement will have a lot of, I'll just say, second order and third order issues that needs to be fully baked in for us to really do it well. Having class sizes of 30 or 35 without parapro support, without small group or individual or safety or supervision, that's not worth gaining back 5 or 7 days. It's not worth it if you're going to have class sizes that are untenable and safety and work environments that are not good for students as well. Student learning is the constant, right? Student learning is the constant. We want growth. Time is a variable. Student learning is the constant. Time is a variable. Instruction, quality instruction, which was mentioned quite a bit in the executive order, is another variable. Take away the staff, take away the support for instruction, increase the class sizes, decrease the safety, have basically poor learning environments, time becomes ineffective. So we need to have safe and conducive learning environments and high quality instruction as paramount things for student learning growth. So implementing this executive order will create more challenges than solutions without the resources. Right now, we spend about 85% of our budgets on staffing. So to add more days or add more time, we have to reopen our contracts. We have to ask our classified staff, hey, will you work another 7 or 8 days? And teachers, will you work another 7 or 8 days? Or, hey, let's just add another 30 minutes to the day. Will you work an extra 30 minutes or will you work an extra whatever? That's not easy. And then at the same time, I'll tell them, hey, I'm gonna cut 10% of you more or 15% of you more. And now you're gonna have this too. So it needs a lot of time. It needs a lot of communication. It needs a lot of funding. And I would just say this, I cannot cut another 8 to 10% of my staff and then tell you that I can in good faith ensure that my students will thrive and my staff will thrive. I reduced us by 14 positions this year. So, and I'm planning to reduce us by another 6 to 7 positions next year. Let alone, George, let's reduce another 8 to 10% of my staff. That doesn't work. So I don't mind increased time. I don't mind collaborating on it, but it needs to be collective and it needs state support, state funding support, not more layoffs. More layoffs is probably not going to create this. It's going to create this. More time is going to create this with the resource and the support. So I'll just stop right there and maybe I'll add more comments here and there, but thank you.
So that was just a piece of a response, and that, again, there's a whole second part where he addresses ODE, who said there is no support. And there was some laughter actually after that there was no support. And then Superintendent Mendoza asked how they will be able, how we are expected to do this without the support from the state. And then they took the vote and it was a unanimous yes across the board. This morning, and this will be the last one, 5 days later, they had a surprise meeting that was posted, because today that same board came back to set the instructional targets that districts are going to be asked to meet. So today they announced instructional targets that districts will have to meet for their kids. And this last one we're going to watch again this morning is Superintendent Mendoza's response to that.
Okay, let's go to Superintendent Mendoza.
Thank you, Chair Skurlock. That's a great update right there. I'll just say I'm very thankful to see that adjustment.
Sorry. We can skip.
Collectively, I would say.
I will leave that we can address that later, but it's the next slide, I'm sorry. There we go. Thank you. That was just this morning.
I mentioned this earlier about eighth grade math, so I'm gonna stick to that I'm very concerned about an annual effect size of 10 or 0.10. It's double the annual what we're doing for third grade. I think it's ambitious for us to do it, but I don't think that we even have heard or know of a clear statewide plan yet to support. And I think for me, it's going to be a lot of funding or a lot of professional development, a lot of instructional coaching. And the reality is it's going to take, staff. If you're going to do interventions, it takes, small group instruction, individual support. It's going to take a lot of staff with training to that staff. And so it's like we need a clear statewide plan with significant funding to do these types of things. I wish, or I would love for our board to think of it as like, if third grade reading has a 0.5 effect size, I would love for it to be the same. That to me is probably proportionate. I think if we don't do very well with this effect size, it's going to be seen as we failed, and that was a poor return on our investment, and that it'll be used like as a tool to keep hammering and saying that schools don't do a good enough job with teaching math. And that, like, to me, I'll just say that's depressing, or it hurts morale, etc. And when we talk about SMART goals, strategic, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, but attainable. To me, when you have an opt-out at the same time, and in our school district, we have about 15% taking the state test at the high school, just 15%. And then when we have now 70 or 75% taking the state test at the middle school, and they can opt out, and then you're counting basically their eighth grade achievement. I think it's going to keep more students are going to opt out. Not more are going to start taking the test. It's just more crumble over time. So when you have less students participating, less students taking the test, and then you still have these results like this, you're not going to get that result. You're just going to keep seeing things crumble. So, and for me, it's like, I wish the state board would know, what is the plan, or what is the framework? How much support are students going to get? How much support our staff, is staff going to get? What is that going to look like? What is this framework? And who's partnering with our school districts right now to create this framework? And are they getting feedback from our teachers? Are these state associations also involved? So those are things that are just like feeling that we should know about. How is our instruction going to change? What will professional development look like? How will we support staffing? How will you help us with schedules for intervention? All of that to me. So my question to you would just be, how will the framework improve math instruction and raise achievement in eighth grade math, while at the same time we have opt-out?
Impossible.
Great.
So I want to thank again.
Thank you so much.
Superintendent Mendoza, Becky Timchuk. Once again, this framework passed unanimously today, with no changes and no pause to address some of these things that he's brought up consistently over time. So I'm going to ask Dr. West for some thoughts on this. But I also want to compliment all of the superintendents and that are doing this work. And I think it's important for the community and the teachers and the parents to see the message that you hear from our superintendent is a message that has been echoed with superintendents across the state on behalf of teachers, on behalf of students, on behalf of classroom learning environments. So Director Lozano, when you say like we are all in this together, we are. And I'm very thankful for the superintendent voice, and I want people to hear what that voice is on a state level. And it is still not landing. So I'm gonna see Dr. West, you probably are obviously just seeing that from this morning. That was just this morning. And again, who in this state is watching this? Nobody. And what is the headline that we see from the governor? We're increasing instructional time. And all of a sudden parents, yeah, great, instructional time. So there's a real danger here in not having the context behind this. And again, locally, we're lucky in that I think we are providing the context to counter that narrative. But it's important. I think it's more important that we start bringing in that higher level so people can see what it is that boards are trying to work with here.
Well, there are a couple of different issues discussed in the videos. I'll start with the instructional time video. I've not spent a lot of time there, but to illustrate for our school district, the real impact, if we cannot include, for example, conferences and professional learning in our instructional time, if we were required to add 6 days, for us, that's about another $3 million. With the 4.6 million that we're reducing right now, we are in a really tough spot. We are looking at reducing 51 FTE across our district. Add $3 million to that. So when Superintendent Mendoza says there are real costs to these policies, he's not wrong. The other thing I want to illustrate with the instructional time conversation is that he was absolutely right that the most important thing that we can do to improve outcomes for kids is make sure that we have the absolute best instruction taking place in our classrooms. That is where our focus needs to be. In fact, the study that Stanford Children published with Echo Northwest related to instructional time. I pulled up a footnote here that really struck me as I read this study, because this is the study that is driving the conversation right now around instructional time. And on page 8, there's a footnote number 18 in reference to studies that show that lower chronic absenteeism is associated with higher ELA proficiencies. And more instructional time is associated with higher ELA proficiencies. But footnote number 18 says these associations are suggestive, but not proof of causation. For example, a simple regression of 3rd grade ELA proficiency on instructional time, chronic absentee rates, student characteristics such as poverty, race, ethnicity, yield statistically significant coefficients for instructional time and chronic absenteeism, but they are only about half as strong as the simple correlations described above. What that means is that the correlations that are referenced here within this study, those correlations are true and accurate for the statistical analysis that was done, but when you control for variables such as student demographics, those correlations are significantly weakened. So we are pointing to data to say, see, we've got to increase instructional time, where if you actually dig into the data, what you see is that, once again, we are ignoring the real cause and the real problem in our school system, which is that we are not equitably educating students across this state. And we've had some conversations in this space about the state school fund formula and whether it equitably funds students. We've had some conversations about the 3rd grade reading measure and how for our school district, that is not an accurate reflection of what students know and can do in terms of their literacy development, because we educate so many students in Spanish. So I think there's more underneath the hood of this conversation than the conversation that's actually taking place in public. And that is, I think, part of the problem that we have as a state is we look for the simple solution. We look for the clickbait, what's going to get the attention, what is going to make it look like we are doing something, instead of actually lifting up the hood and figuring out what is the real problem here. What is it going to take to address the real problem that we have concerns about? Okay, now let's reverse engineer that, let's finance that, and let's commit sustained political will to address those issues. I can't fix that at a state level. We can't fix that at a state level. We can advocate and we'll continue to do that. We can point out, like Superintendent Mendoza, when there are errors in thinking. But we can't change what the Board of Education is doing. What we can do is lift up the hood here in Forest Grove School District and look at what are the things that we have purview and control over. What are the things that we can work on and devote our energy, our resources, and sustained attention to improving those things. And that is why in this space and in other spaces, I talk so frequently about instruction. I come back to that over and over again. That is the single most important thing that we can focus on as a school district to see better outcomes for our students. World-class, evidence-based instruction. And that is our effort. That is what we're focused on.
Thank you. Comments from the board?
Yeah, I watched the board meeting where the governor made her announcement. And how the Board of Education reacted to that was a lot like the mayor in Carter Country, if you remember that old comedy on television, where he would say, handle it, handle it, handle it. And let the police chief bear the brunt of the decision making. And that camps with me because that's what the State Board of Education did. They kicked the ball down the street. Or kicked the can, or whatever the hell it is that they kicked. They did not do their job. And they did not do their job unanimously. That's what gets me. Is that every one of them said, yeah, this is probably not the best idea in the world, but I'm voting yes anyway. And to my mind, that is no way to run a railroad.
Yeah, so I think that gives us a little context and maybe the community context from some of the things that we're pushing up against as a board when we're asking to support what Dr. West is saying, what we know we can do here, and eventually continue our advocacy maybe locally with our community and our parents to help them see where we are headed, what we are doing, but also just an awareness for that community to see these are the things still that we are trying to, I don't know what we're trying to do. We're trying to scream like, please stop and also do these things over here. And I think, so I just, that gives us a good starting point. I think, I'm not gonna show those in every meeting, but I think those were key just to show the struggle. And just know that when you see those news headlines about education, again, we want to get people reoriented to here. Because I think what we share is real on the ground, what's happening, what we need, where we're going, and we're headed in the right direction. And so it's battling the narrative that's coming from everywhere outside.
I think also, I mean, our number one goal is to focus on our students and do the very best. And instruction has to be top priority, absolutely top priority. But on the other hand, or simultaneously, we really need to become more engaged as a community in who we elect. And we need to ask some real hard questions of people running for office that represent us. You know, how engaged are you going to be in your district, in your school? How are you going to advocate? What do you know about the different groups that are making these decisions in Salem. And we need to have people that are really going to be committed towards, challenging what's happening in Salem. And it can't be just Forest Grove, Washington County, it has to be statewide. But this isn't fair to our students, this isn't fair to our teachers, and we should be doing a better job, and we can't, because we have people in there that make a unanimous decision based on what? I mean, how many of them are in the school districts? How many are in the classrooms? How many are talking on that board to superintendents, to teachers, to parents? So we must simultaneously really challenge people running for office, and we have to have a very, very good educated populace, because they will become the workers, and companies don't come to Oregon unless they have talented staff, skilled staff, and they don't bring their families here if there's not good, viable school districts. So, that's my 2 cents, but, I think anybody in the community or anybody watching this, you need to go out and really question people running for office. And I mean, there's a lot of issues, there are environmental issues, there's all kinds of issues. But our children are our future, and we need to elect people that are really going to support our school districts and really ask the questions and really challenge.
Anything else? Okay. I think we'll see everybody on the 12th for our next board meeting, and the 14th, and I think we adjourn at 7:05. Yeah.